Hi guys, this is Jan for Chess24. Today we're gonna take a look at the game Mamedyarov against Giri. Now, we have done so before. In their last encounter, Anish Giri defeated Shak Mamedyarov very convincingly in the Qatar Masters Open, was part of Anish's 6-game winning streak in that tournament. Giri has been doing very well recently, crossed the 2800 barrier, at least in the live rating list, during the Fide Grand Prix. And that's where this game is from. It's from the Fide Grand Prix round 9. Both players haven't done that spectacularly, both on 50% before this game. Giri lost his 2800 again and faces Mamedyarov with black. Two very entertaining players, and the first surprise comes on the first move. Shak Mamedyarov plays the move 1e4. He pretty much exclusively played 1d4 with the occasional c4 or knight f3 mixed in over the last couple of years. I've often criticized him for not being flexible enough in the opening, and he's seemingly making steps to alter that situation, and he goes for the move 1e4, and one reason could be that he expected to see the line that we will see in the game. After e4, Giri plays the move c5, which arguably is the more combative move at top level. Most guys can play c5 or e5, and by choosing c5, Giri, who knows a lot about pretty much every opening, very flexible, shows that he has aggressive intentions. And he also has a bit of a soft spot for this line, which he's been playing a lot recently. e6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight c6, knight to c3, and queen c7, which I believe in English is called the Taimanov variation. Black keeps the setup flexible, will go a6 next, and then determine where to put his pieces according to what white does. And there's one line in particular which has been featured a lot in the games of Anish Giri. Bishop e3 is the main move, a6, and here, actually in yesterday's video, in case you've seen it, we've seen the move bishop d3 in the game by Pavel Elyanov with black, but today we see the move queen to f3. This might look a bit funny, but it has a very sound idea. The queen is just going to the king side, white wants to castle, queenside next move, and then have his queen on a more active square than d2. Queen d2 is the main line here, knight f6, long castles, bishop b4, or bishop e7 with endless theory debates. But queen to f3, played amongst others by Mr. Paco Vallejo, is a more active implementation of that idea, and arguably the reason Shak Mamedyarov went for the move 1e4 at all today. Because Anish Giri has faced this move at least 3 times that I'm aware of. One against Mamedyarov's compatriot Timur Rajabov, and Giri, in his notes to another game where he faced this move against Ivan Šarić, he wrote that he single-handedly is responsible for the popularity of the move queen f3 because he insists on meeting it with a very awkward setup. So, in order to be consistent, he does so again in this game. But before we look at Anish's awkward setup, there's one move I would like to share with you, which unfortunately is not good. It would be very nice if it was, because it's very aesthetically pleasing, the move bishop to a3. It takes the pawn on b2, and b takes a3 does not work, since knight e5 is a very strong double attack. The problem, though, is that white does not have to take on a3 and can just spoil the fun by going long castles when after knight e5, queen to g3, it looks like black is doing very well because black has this trick. Nonetheless, the problem is it doesn't win, it doesn't even equalize, it doesn't even work. After queen takes c3, white just goes b takes a3. It turns out that the weakened white king's position is not the main factor in the position. Instead, the main factor are these dark squares in the black camp and the numerous weaknesses. And this position is borderline unplayable for black. For example, queen takes a3, king b1, knight g6, knight b3, tending bishop to c5, and white is firmly in the driver's seat. So there you go, I gave you a terrible novelty which you should never ever play for free, the move bishop a3, probably been mentioned somewhere already, doesn't work. And Anish-Giri, of course, must have spent a lot of time analyzing this variation, since he sticks to this line on top level, keeps repeating it, goes for the move knight e5. By the way, a normal move which is playable here is the move knight f6, followed by bishop e7 and castles when the game continues. But Giri likes his move knight e5, trying to punish the white queen sortie, queen to g3 and h5. Not what you learn in chess school, but once again, very concrete play. Black is intending h4 when this queen would have to go to this slightly unpleasant h3 square. The move also has some other advantages. In some lines, knight g4 could be useful, having that square. And long term, in many Sicilians nowadays, Black actually plays h5 to just stop white from getting in g4. So h5 is a pretty common move in the Sicilian. Still, Black's setup, of course, is very, very provocative by going knight e5, moving this piece second time, putting it into a pin, and then following up with h5. He is asking for it, and Mamedyarov came prepared. In previous games, we've seen the move f3 played by Kayakin, we've seen the move f4 played twice, both by Rajabov and Šarić, against Anish-Giri when after h4, queen h3, knight c4. Position looks scary for Black, but he seems to be holding himself, at least he did in those games, and Giri keeps repeating the line. But Mamedyarov had a fresh idea in store, and true to his style, it is a pretty spectacular move, the move knight to f5. Played like Mikhail Tal, except Tal did not prepare his knight sacrifices with the computer, and this one is not a surprise for Anish-Giri, because the move is quite natural actually, and it looks very dangerous. The point is after e takes f5, knight d5 comes with tempo, and Black is in a bit of trouble. ef5, not necessarily a bad move, but Giri decided not to go here. After queen b8, there would be the move bishop b6, threatening knight c7 check, and it's not easy for Black to even stay alive here. Computer spits out lines where he does stay alive, let's say h4, queen b3, bishop to d6. The computer says it's not so clear, but after f4, knight c6, e5, it looks very, very scary for Black. White will sooner or later win some material back with knight c7. These pieces are not really contributing. White can easily develop, has a space advantage. So not a position you want to get with Black. Giri thought for a couple minutes, but not enough to make us believe he wasn't prepared for this move knight f5. Thought for like 5 minutes and went for the move f6. Once again, not very standard play to follow up h5 with f6, but it does have a concrete idea, which is to reinforce this knight on e5, and it seems to work, which is really what matters. First point is that the white knight on f5, scary as looks, does not have anywhere good to go. Knight takes g7 check comes to mind, but Black reacts with king f7. Turns out the knight is trapped on g7 and doesn't do enough damage to justify the investment. Another move that looks cute at first sight is the move knight to h4, intending to jump to g6. Doesn't really work either, because Black goes g5, when knight g6 is met with h4, and this queen can't maintain this pin, therefore White just lost material. While the more clever bishop takes g5 is possible, but still not very good. After f takes g5, knight to g6. Looks like White is winning material back, but Black has plenty of options to get a good position here. One of them bishop to g7, the other one bishop to d6. Knight takes h8 and knight to f7, winning back the knight on h8 and staying not only with a small material advantage, arguably, because White gets 2 pawns, but more importantly with tremendous dark square control, and Black is better here. So none of the knight moves work. I'm sure Shak Mamedyarov didn't spend much time on them. Said he castled queenside and is saying, okay Anish, sooner or later you're going to have to accept my sacrifice when I will get my attack with knight to d5. And indeed, there is nothing better Black can do than taking on f5 here. If he prolonged leaving this knight alive, white would go f4, increase the pressure. So Giri now took it, and the point of f6 is revealed after knight to d5. The queen doesn't have to go passive to b8, but can go to c6, which is a much nicer square. Still, the action is similar. White goes bishop b6, planning to give a check on c7, and black has to decide what to do about it. Bit to my surprise, Giri spent quite some time here. I'm such a fan of his opening preparation that I was assuming he might still be in book even here. And who knows, he might have been and just spent time to recall his analysis or double check. He played a human move, which is a trendy word for looks good but not first line of the computer. However, if you give the computer some more time, it might change his mind. He went for the move f takes e4. This gives back material but secures black gets a nice center and his king won't be bothered all that much. Computer is mentioning some alternatives like the move king f7, which looks quite dangerous. White goes ef followed by f4, or the move f4. Just stopping this ef, and after queen f4, now king f7. But this position also is not everybody's cup of tea, I would guess. White already has one pawn, but more importantly, his pieces work together very, very nicely, while the black pieces really don't make a lot of sense yet. Black king on f7, quite exposed. White could just go queen e3, planning to follow up with f4. Computer gives equality even here. I don't know, this looks scary for black to play. Could be that we'll see some more practical examples after this game. But I quite like Anish Giri's decision in this position, which is to go f takes e4, give material back. Knight c7 check is forced, king f7. Mamedyarov went queen b3 check here. Could have started with knight takes a8, but maybe he wanted to eliminate the option of black going d6, not d5. Not sure that was a serious option, but why allow it? White went queen b3 check when black has to go d5, and now went for knight takes a8. Position has stabilized a bit after the move knight e7 at least, which was necessary to defend the d5 pawn. Black has one pawn for the exchange. He has a nice center with these two pawns. And he has quite easy development with g6, followed by bishop h6, and bishop g4, bishop f5, bishop e6, one of those squares. So the black position is quite easy to play, while white has to make sure that his pieces, which are a bit all over the place, get into the game. However, if they do get into the game, the next move, get back into the game, that is, knight c7, helps that cause. They could be quite annoying because knight c7 introduces all kinds of ideas with knight takes d5 and threatens knight takes d5. So this is the position they got on the board. Giri played the most normal move, the move bishop to g4. Once again, developing with tempo, attacking the rook. There were alternatives. King to g6, for example, is a move my computer likes when after knight takes d5, knight takes d5, black is winning since rook d5 runs into bishop e6 and white can't escape this pin and keep it all together. Still, bishop g4 can't be wrong, developing with tempo. And Mamedyarov in this position thought for 50 moves. In the end, he settled on the move rook d4, which is also the move preferred by the computer. I don't think he spent that much time on the move rook d2, which of course is another way to escape this attack. But then black would just go g6 and have the option of bishop h6 in many lines. So d2 seems to be a worse square than d4 for the rook. What I think Mamedyarov spent his time on is the move knight takes d5. Offering to sacrifice the exchange back in order to clarify the situation, maybe expose the black king a little bit. But it turns out that black has two options here which both seem to be alright for him. One is a greedy bishop d1, and after, let's say, knight e7, king d1, black goes king to d7, follows with bishop d6. The position seems to be more or less equal because white is not quite in time to develop his pieces so smoothly. The other option black has, and I would guess the one Mamedyarov was more concerned about, his position is the move bishop to e6 back. Might look a little strange, bishop g4, knight takes d5, bishop e6, but whatever works. And after knight e7, bishop e7, queen e3, rook c8, we get a very complicated position. Black being a whole exchange down now, right after c3, bishop takes a2. He gets one pawn back. White king feels a little bit uneasy on c1. The black pieces are quite active. Extremely complicated position. Very hard to determine who's better and why, but black seems to have his very fair share of the chances in this position. So Mamedyarov, probably seeing black has two decent options against, knight takes d5, went for the move rook d4. Once again, preparing knight takes d5. Here, Giri faced a choice. He went for the move knight d7, forcing the action. Wasn't forced, even though it is forcing. He could have played the move g6 as well, intending bishop h6 check just to continue his development. When, I don't know, if you analyze some lines, this position quite often leads to some sort of dynamic equality or peters out. I will give you one completely unforced sample line. h3, bishop f5, king b1 to stop being checked here. Knight to c8, knight takes d5, knight takes b6, knight takes b6 check. Bishop to e6, bishop to c4, bishop to c5. All of these are the computer's first moves, and as it often happens in a complicated position, you switch on the computer, let him do things, and all of a sudden what you're ending up with is an equal endgame or a perpetual. Both of these things happen quite often. Here we get an equal ending after the clever move rook hd1 when bishop takes b6 doesn't work because of rook d6 check. So instead, black takes on d4, rook takes d4, and there you go, equal rook endgame. Rook and knight, but probably rook after knight c4. So that could have happened, and g6 after rook d4 was by no means a bad move. Of course, impossible to calculate all the options both sides have here. Seems the position is more or less balanced. Giri instead went for knight d7, which is a lot more forcing. How often have I said that word during this video? I think a bit too much, so let's use again. Mamedyarov keeps forcing the action with knight takes d5 here. And he did have an alternative, which is not an easy move to make, but maybe was quite a good move. The move bishop to a5. Point is that, first of all, the point is it doesn't lose material. b6 looks like the correct answer, but b6 does not work. The point being that after knight takes d5, bishop e6, knight takes e7, bishop takes e7, bishop c4. Black is not in time to grab his piece, since here after ba, bishop e6, queen e6, there is nice little tactic based on this pin. Rook takes d7, taking back is illegal, and white emerges up material. So bishop a5, as anti-positional as it looks, might have been a good move. Not anti-positional, it just looks very shaky. The best move for black, according to my soulless machine, is a move b5, which is very, very hard to come up with. It's just stopping the white bishop from going to c4. And after knight takes d5, black has the move knight c5 now winning. So bishop a5 would have led to a very complicated position, b5, h3, or queen e3. I have no clue who is better and why. But instead, Mamedyarov went for knight takes d5 when matters are a lot more clear-cut. Knight takes d5. Black has two moves. Both of them seem to lead to more or less equal positions. In the game he played knight takes d5. The alternative was a move we've seen before, bishop e6, pinning on this diagonal when after knight e7, bishop e7, we have yet another forcing line, bishop to c4. Oh no, I'm sorry. Start with bishop c4, not with knight e7, bishop e7. This is more accurate. Knight d5, bishop d5. And black has the little trick. Knight takes b6. A lot of action takes place on this diagonal around the various pins. Here black is using it to simplify. After bishop c6, bishop b3, you could talk me into black being a little better, even though even this should be an equal ending. But there is, I believe, a cleaner alternative in bishop e6, queen e6, queen e6, king e6, rook takes e4 check. This is a position where the computer will give black a small edge, but I have a very hard time believing it. White has a rook and a pawn against bishop and knight, which material is maybe slightly in black's favor, but if the knight doesn't have an outpost, and here it doesn't really have one, and the rooks have open files to work with, which they do here, it's very hard for me to believe that white could ever be worse here. Bishop and knight tend to not do all that well against the rook. If I was pressed to choose here, I think I would slightly prefer white even. But the most likely result would be a draw. So I don't believe this was a chance Giri missed. I don't think black can ever be better in this position. And maybe therefore Giri, after knight takes d5, did not go for the move bishop e6, but instead took on d5, which simplifies once again after rook d5, bishop e6, forcing white to give back the exchange with rook takes d7 check, queen takes d7, and the pleasant move to make bishop c4. Always nice to develop and parry a threat at the same time. When after bishop c4, queen e6, most of the action has disappeared and we're left with a position with equal material. Black won his exchange back, but had to give up the very nice pawn on d5, so not quite clear who won and who lost. It's just the way things went, and the position is not only material balance, but also positionally. White doesn't want to wait around for black to finish his development, therefore keeps him busy with queen c7, queen e7. Mamedyarov repeats moves once, now decides it can't hurt to try queen to c8, stopping black from developing too smoothly. But of course he goes g6, threatening bishop h6 check, winning the queen, and there's not all that much grounds for white to claim an advantage here. He tried bishop e3, black just played bishop g7, now the bishop h6 check is no longer a check. And what are you going to do with white? Queen c4 check was tried, queen e6. The endgames only black could be better, because his majority starts moving a lot faster, and instead Mamedyarov decided to repeat moves. Quite a good decision. He had no grounds whatsoever to hope for an advantage here anymore. So the game ended in a draw on move 31, queen c7, queen e7, queen c4, and so on and so forth. A well-played game by both sides, which started off very spectacularly. Knight e5 and h5 has been seen many times before. Mamedyarov tried to punish it with the move knight f5, but Giri was ready for it. f6, another funny move. And very typical game for modern chess. If both sides play well, are willing to sacrifice material in order to defend and not give up the initiative, a result is a very possible draw. Not sure if that sentence made a lot of sense. Anyway, the game ended in a draw. It was entertaining though. Both sides played well. Both sides remain at 50%. Let's see if we can bring up the standings. Here they are. If you could see them, they'd be even more useful, but we will manage that in the Grand Prix after 9 rounds. Tomaszewski is in the sole lead. What am I doing? This can only take hours, and we will all be able to enjoy the scores. Here we go. Yevgeny Tomaszewski, not the favorite. In fact, I believe the third lowest rated player in the field is crushing that very field with 7 out of 9, 1.5 points ahead of Dmitry Yakovenko, while our heroes of today, Shak Mamedyarov and Anish Giri, are both on 50%. Giri only being on 50% also means that he lost his 2800 rating, which he had during the tournament earlier, but he still is in striking distance. Once again, we will try to bring it up. Almost there. Here we go. We see the live rating list, where not only Anish Giri on number 6 lost some points over the last couple games. We see all this red here, and therefore is only rated 2794.8, 2795. Not too shabby rating. Let's see if we will have members of the 2800 club when this tournament is over. Both Grishuk and Giri, still 2 games to play, could make it by winning another game or maybe 2 games depending on the opposition. It's going to be interesting to see. For now, it looks like they did install a bit of a bouncer, as Jonathan Tisdale, I believe, tweeted, in the 2800 club, and a lot of guys were kicked out. Only Carlsen and Caruana barely are members. Let's see how that goes. I'm rambling. Thanks for watching this Mamedyarov against Giri game from the Grand Prix. Hope you enjoyed the video. 2 rounds to go. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. See you guys later. Bye bye.